Hello, how are you doing? Welcome back to the channel. It is here, people. England against New Zealand. The All Blacks are in town, and this is a massive test match this week between these two sides. Really important for both of them. The teams are out, so in this video, I'm going to be reacting to the teams and previewing the game. As I say, I think it's a really important match for both of these squads. If you are new here, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and most importantly, drop a comment down below. What do you make of the two squads that the coaches have picked, and how do you see this game going at Twickenham on Saturday? All right, let's get into it. So the first thing to mention is congratulations to Owen Farrell and congratulations to Brodie Retallick. Both of those players are making their 100th caps this weekend. Owen Farrell technically already has 100 if you're including British and Irish Lions caps, but in terms of pure England caps, he is hitting the century mark, and so is Brodie Retallick. And those are two guys who, in my opinion, are two modern greats of the game. Owen Farrell is not the most popular player, both amongst English fans actually and amongst fans of other nations. He's never necessarily been someone that is that well liked, but he is an unbelievably good rugby player. He has been central to the good things England have done over the last kind of decade or so. I remember when he burst onto the scene, and he was one of those young guys that came in and just immediately looked home in an international test match. So congratulations to him on 100. It's also worth mentioning as well, if you look at the amount of English men's players that have reached 100 caps, it's only Jason Leonard and Ben Youngs. There are not many. It's not easy to do. There are some unbelievable legends of English rugby. Johnny Wilkinson, Lawrence Dallaglio, Martin Johnson. I could name loads more that have never got to 100 caps. So the fact that Owen Farrell is getting there, I think, is a huge testament to him. It is really not easy to do. And then in Brodie Retallick, you have another guy who has just been a legend of the game. I mean, him and Sam Whitelock have been probably the most consistent second row pairing to be performing at an excellent level, again, over the last decade, maybe more. And he's kind of one of these guys that is a bridge between two All Black sides, in my opinion. He was still very much associated with the era of dominance, and he's still there now when the side is struggling a bit more. But first of all, Owen Farrell, Brodie Retallick, awesome for those two guys to bring up a century of caps. Two greats of the game. Where do they rank, in your opinion, in terms of modern greats of the game? It's difficult, very different positions, but I'm really excited to see both of them get their moment of applause, get their moment of recognition on Saturday. On to the rest of the team news. I'll start off with England. I'll get on to the All Blacks. That will be coming up in the video. In terms of the 15 Eddie Jones has gone with, some interesting selections here. So we've got Freddie Stewart at fullback, Jack Nowell on one wing and Johnny May on the other. You've got Marcus Smith that continues at fly half with Owen Farrell and Manu Tuolangi in the centres. The front row is Ellis Genge, Luke Cowan-Dickie and Kyle Sinclair, with Itoje and Hill in the second row. That's interesting. Sam Simmonds, Curry and Vunipola, the back row. The most interesting part of this team selection for me is the fact that Maro Itoje is shifted back into the second row, and Sam Simmonds has been named in a back row where he's on the flank along with Vunipola and along with Curry. Itoje, first of all, Eddie Jones has been saying so far this autumn, you basically need to pick someone like an Itoje or a Laws, a traditional second row, on your blind side at international rugby, because you need the extra line-out option. And it's a classic smoke and mirrors Eddie Jones changing from week to week, because Itoje shifted back into the second row. I'm actually a big fan of that selection though. Johnny Hill and Maro Itoje at this moment in time are England's two best second rows. I like to see them in the second rows, and what it also means is I'm really excited about this English back row, because Sam Simmonds is going to get his opportunity on the flank. We know what Curry can do, we know what Vunipola can do, and Sam Simmonds, I know he scored a hat-trick once in the Six Nations against Italy, but he's never really been able to establish himself in the England back row. And part of the reason is because Exeter, who he plays for, they set up in such a way that they have Dave Ewers, who's a massive ball carrier, and it allows Sam Simmonds as a bit more of a slighter player, more explosive, quicker option to really utilise the space, rather than being someone that has to hit loads of rucks or is really key in the defensive line. So I hope with this setup, Vunipola at 8, he can be the big ball carrier and that really big presence in the back row. Curry, you know, is going to work all day, tackle, hit breakdowns. Maybe that could lead to Sam Simmonds then exploiting a little bit more space in the wider channels. We'll wait and see how they use him, but I think this is a huge opportunity for Sam Simmonds against the All Blacks at Twickenham. I really hope he takes this opportunity. And also the other thing to mention in terms of the back row is Jack Willis as the replacement. I think like all England fans, we want to see Jack Willis get that opportunity because he's so good over the breakdown. He is one of the best in the world. He's the best in the Gallagher Premiership in terms of the jackal and stealing the ball. I'd really like to see him get a bit of a run in the team and some time off the bench. Outside of that, Van Portfleet at 9, he continues there. I think that's a good selection. Ben Youngs is still in the squad. I know a lot of England fans won't even want to see him in the matchday squad. He is still there, but I think the zip that Van Portfleet can give the ball, the quicker ball, with Marcus Smith, that's a much more exciting 9 and 10. I've said on the channel before, in my opinion, Ben Youngs' time in the England setup, certainly as one of the first 2 guys, should probably be over. He's an option in terms of experience if other players get injured to bring into the squad, but I just haven't been convinced by his performances recently. But that's the England squad. Eddie Jones's selections always get people kind of moaning. Overall, I'm pretty happy with that. I do think the Itoje back into the second row is interesting. I think the back row is fascinating, and it's another chance for Smith, Farrell, Tuolangi to try and work on their cohesion, give them more game time at this level. So England, I'm pretty happy with that selection. Let's wait and see. As for the All Blacks, coming into this game on a run of good wins, 6 wins in a row after a year in which they have had a tough time, losing twice to Ireland in that tour. They lost to South Africa, they lost to Argentina. Statistically, it is one of their worst seasons since 1998, but even so, they're on a good run of form. I was impressed with the way they were able to change the game against Scotland. It looked like they were heading for defeat, and they were able to wrestle the momentum back in that game. So in terms of their team, Ethan de Groot, Cody Taylor and Tyrrell Lomax, the front row. Brodie Retallick, as I've already said, in the second row along with Sam Whitelock. Scott Barrett at 6, that's fascinating. It's the opposite to what England have done in that given themselves an extra line-out option in the back row. Dalton Papali'i and Ardie Surveyor. Then it's Aaron Smith, Richie Mwanga, Geordie Barrett, Rico Ioane, Caleb Clark, Mark Telea and Bowden Barrett at fullback. Good looking New Zealand team, I think. I like to see Aaron Smith starting. I thought when TJ Perenara came off the bench in the Scotland game, Aaron Smith wasn't playing in that game, but Perenara changed the game, really helped to add something to it. I think Aaron Smith starting, he's a top quality 9. That's quite an interesting battle actually between Van Portfleet and Aaron Smith. Here you've got the new young guy who's taking the international scene, maybe not the international scene by storm, but it's had a real impact for England at international level against one of the most experienced guys there is in the game, against Aaron Smith. That's really interesting. But I mentioned Scott Barrett at 6. I mean, it is funny, isn't it? How Eddie Jones has been talking about needing a second row, an extra line-out option in your back row, and he's reversed that, whereas New Zealand have stuck Scott Barrett onto the blind side for this game. So that line-out battle, those line-out options, is going to be really, really interesting to keep an eye on. And the rest of that back row, Dalton Papali'i and Ardie Surveyor, I think have been superb on this autumn tour. Ardie Surveyor should have been nominated for World Player of the Year. It's scandalous that he wasn't. And Papali'i, I think, is a growing force in international rugby. I've been impressed from the small amount I've seen from him. Admittedly, I haven't seen, obviously, as much of the All Blacks as I have of England. So I think overall, for me, what I'm drawn towards here is the battle in those back rows. Barrett, Papali'i, Surveyor up against Curry, Simmonds and Vunipola. That is mouth-watering. That is such an interesting battle to keep an eye on. And outside of that, how do we see this game going? If I'm being honest, I think it's incredibly difficult to call. I think it's so important for both of these sides because New Zealand is to keep that winning run going. They look like they've arrested the issues that were plaguing them earlier this year, or has it been papering over the cracks? Whereas for England, they need this victory. After losing to Argentina in their first game, they bounced back against Japan, but it was a relatively easy victory in the end, but credit to them for getting the win. What happens now when they come up against serious opponents, really, really tough opponents in the All Blacks? I think they could get the job done, but honestly, this England team has been so inconsistent, I don't know. And if you look at it, I would go as far to simplify it and say, if New Zealand turn up and play like they did against Wales, or like they did in the opening period of the game and the last period of the game against Scotland, they'll win the game. But if they show that inconsistency, which they did for, a good hour, 50 minutes or so of the game time against Scotland, where Scotland really got on top, then England could make life difficult for them. The backdrop to all of this as well is it is a repeat of the 2019 World Cup final. These sides don't play each other too much. I heard a stat, in fact, earlier this week, that in the Eddie Jones era, England had played New Zealand twice. They played them once at Twickenham and they've played them in the World Cup semi-final. They played Australia 11 times during that period, which shows you how rare it is for England and the All Blacks to play. So that adds another layer of intrigue. From the All Blacks perspective, revenge? Is revenge on your mind? New Zealand fans, after the World Cup semi-final, it was a long time ago now in 2019, but let me know your thoughts on that one. I think it's an interesting game. I think it could go either way. If I'm having to stick my neck out, I'm going to give it to New Zealand, just because I haven't been convinced enough by England yet. I personally hope I'm wrong, but let me know in the comments down below. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and also let me know what you make of the team news. For me, some interesting selections in there, particularly in the back row. I'll leave it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.